I'm going to talk about my mom and dad, which are actually your great grandmother and great grandfather, and how they escaped Germany and the Nazis. Um, it was quite an ordeal for them. Very difficult, very emotional. Uh, my mom and dad got married when she was about 20 years old, and it was during the rise of Hitler and his power around 1938. Uh, Around that time, they were gathering up all the men and taking them to concentration camps. So mom and dad had an apartment that was broken into by the Nazis, and they took all the men and took them to concentration camp. My dad ended up in Buchenwald. Even though earlier he tried to escape in the woods on his bicycle, there was really no place for him to go, so he ended up having to come back home and got taken in anyway. So while he was in the concentration camp, my mom was able to find a way to get a sponsor at that time, before the end of 1939. If you could show that you had a sponsor and you promised to leave the country, they would let you out. So my mother had a relative on my father's side who was in the United States that created a letter that she got her hands on and was able to take to the Gestapo and show them that they had a way out. And it was a really nerve-wracking thing for her, and I think they were all looking over their shoulders because they didn't know who was going to, be killed next or taken to the camps, or they were running out of food. They wouldn't allow any Jews to go grocery shopping, and they kind of survived by non-Jewish friends supplied food for them, etc. So at any rate, eventually they accepted this letter and released my dad in the concentration camp. And my mom picked him up, and they eventually worked their way out of the country on a train. And at the Holland border, the train stopped, and they got all the men off of the train and took all their valuables. Of course, they took all the valuables out of their house before that even ever happened. And my dad was actually lucky to get back on the train because it started moving, and he was the littlest guy out there in the end of the line, and he had to run and jump on the train. Thank God they made it to the border, Holland, and then from there they ended up in Torquay, England, and spent a couple of months there waiting for their quota number to come up so they could come to the USA. And eventually it came up, and they ended up on a ship, and they had to dodge landmines on the way across the Atlantic. And eventually, after a number of days at sea where mom got extremely seasick, one morning she saw the Statue of Liberty, and they were free. And freedom is the big thing for mom and dad, or was. I know you had asked me about what biggest thing about all of this, how it affected their life, and what was the most important thing that they learned from all of this. And mostly it was appreciation for America, the United States, and the freedoms that we have here in this country, and appreciating them. And I think appreciating them a lot more than some people who didn't go through that kind of trauma and that kind of distress. Eventually, my mother's parents were taken away to the camps and killed, and a lot of the other family members were also. So I'm lucky to be here, because otherwise I wouldn't be if they hadn't been strong enough to make it through. When they got to New York, they ended up working as a butler and a maid to scrape together enough money to eventually move to Ohio. And my dad worked loading truck, iron and metal on a scrapyard, and eventually worked his way up to becoming a manager in that business, and was successful. And I feel very lucky and very appreciative and very grateful for everything they did. And that's about it.
Cats have been around since the times of ancient Egypt. They have become a staple of most modern households. This is due to the fact that they make some of the best domesticated pets in America. And frankly, they happen to be my personal favorite animal. This is about how to properly love and care for your feline.
What do you know about cats?
Well, I've been around cats my whole life, I've been taking care of them. I rescued a few. They're great animals.
Oh, nice. So, how long have you been around cats?
My whole life, since I was a very young child.
Oh, so if you could be any cat, which one do you prefer and why?
My own, it's just a black and white domestic cat, lives a pretty easy life, sleeps and eats all day, goes outside at night. It's a good life.
Oh, thanks.
In early 1848, the discovery of gold nuggets in the Sacramento Valley sparked the gold rush. People around the United States, mostly men, borrowed money, sold their properties, or spent their life savings to make it to California. Thousands of gold miners, known as the 49ers, traveled across the mountains or by sea to reach the gold. 3/4 of the male population of San Francisco had left the town for the gold mines, and the number of miners in the area reached 4,000.
How did the gold rush start?
In 1849, lots of men went from New York and other parts of the west and east coast and all came together in San Francisco in order to hopefully strike out rich in the newly found gold in Sacramento.
What type of people came to the gold rush in San Francisco?
All sorts of people came to the gold rush, but it was primarily men who came all the way across, selling their homes, pretty much giving up everything they had in order to hopefully have a chance at making some gold money, as many people call it, and getting claim to some very wealthy prospects of land.
The gold rush was started by accident by finding a gold nugget, but how did it help San Francisco if so many people came over there?
Well, once gold was found in the surrounding areas of San Francisco, many people went out to San Francisco to set up businesses such as laundry services, general stores, food mills, all sorts of trading companies in order to make money that way. And that in itself became quite the industry, and it grew and grew over the years, gaining a lot more people and a lot more momentum to become the city it is today.
During 1938 to 1945, the main infantry fighting force of the German military was called the Wehrmacht. They developed between Panzer Corps, mobile infantry, and an infantry fighting force. They fought in major conflicts, suffering the Mediterranean, the Battle of Crete, Africa Corps, the Western and the Eastern fronts. During that time, especially in the Battle of Britain, when they had the Luftwaffe, which is the Air Corps, fight as well. During the time, many armies dedicated their time to study the tactics done by people like General von Rundstedt, Rommel, and also Luftwaffe commanders to be able to study their tactics. The most infamous tactic used by them was blitzkrieg, which is an infantry fighting tactic using tanks, Most commonly used were light tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, infantry, and aircraft at the same time. Developed by Hitler himself, it was called the Lightning War. During this time, mostly after the war, German generals were complimented on their ferocity in battle. People like Rommel and Wallenstein were mostly given the Knight's Cross of Oakleys with swords and diamonds, which is the highest dedication army given to soldiers in the German army. Even Hitler was awarded the Iron Cross in World War I while doing the reconnaissance mission. During this time, the Waffen-SS was in cooperation with the Wehrmacht as well. Even though they are most infamously known for the war crimes committed during the war and active aggression, they are also complimented for their ferocity in battle. Even to this day, reunions are still held in Germany, while Waffen-SS soldiers come back and they celebrate their old times that they used to have. And even in today's reality of war, everyone looks back to the tactics still used by the Waffen-SS, German infantry, Air Force, and the Panzer Corps to look forward to development in modern infantry tactics.
Did they support Hitler?
No, Rommel was actually one of the members of the assassination team to take out Hitler in one of the operations. Bomb went off, but Hitler was not killed. He was instead evacuated with the rest. 5 generals and other officers were killed, so most or less he just killed his own people. But later, Rommel was killed because, as Hitler stated before, to a marshal, a field marshal, which is the highest ranking in the standard German army in Stalingrad, that no field marshal ever retreats, that he had to commit suicide and shoot himself. So he promoted the general to field marshal to make him shoot himself. So in that case, Rommel was then executed by Hitler for his attempts to kill him.
Were they the main fighting force?
They were the main fighting force of the German army. They attacked the Western and Eastern and the African front. The Waffen-SS were a detachment of the SS who were more or less of a combined, little less of a fighting force made up of tanks and infantry. But they were a light force, only capable of around 30,000 troops, while the German infantry force were capable of 3.6 million.
Who were significant figures?
Significant figures were Field Marshal Erwin Rommel and General von Rundstedt. They were both significant figures. Rommel was known as multiple nicknames in Africa, but he was more significantly known for battles of Tobruk and everything like that, when especially the American forces first arrived in Africa, when they first came on and when Patton was first introduced into the war, how the British forces were being pushed back farther towards the edges past Cairo and pushed back towards their western coast by Rommel, the African Corps.
We will be talking today about Silicon Valley and its importance in the modern world. There have been many advancements in technology recently, and a lot of them have come out of Silicon Valley. Some of the most influential companies choose to have their HQ in Silicon Valley for the reasons that we will discuss later on. A few of these companies are Apple, Google, and Amazon. We will talk about them throughout this documentary. What is Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley is a region in California that has been the location of many of the world's leading businesses.
Why is Silicon Valley so important?
Silicon Valley is important because it is a location where anyone can start a business and get many connections in a short time.
What are some of the companies we'll be discussing in this video?
Apple, Google, and Amazon.